Claire pushed open the double doors leading to the ballroom, balancing a silver tray with practiced ease. The scent of roasted truffle and champagne drifted through the air as laughter echoed from the far end of the hall. She moved silently across. The floor, weaving between tables adorned with white orchids and crystal glassware. At one end of the room, the bride-to-be, Chelsea, stood surrounded by bridesmaids in matching satin robes. Claire paused beside a table and gently placed down the tray of hors d'oeuvres, smoothing the linen napkin beneath the serving stand. Behind her, another server leaned in with a soft chuckle. "Every one of these people smells like they bathe in money," Claire cracked a smile, "and none of them eat the canapes." The two exchanged a quiet laugh before moving apart again, drifting into their roles. Claire didn't mind. She liked this part. The stillness behind the noise, the rhythm of quiet service. She wasn't here to be seen, and she had learned a long time ago how to slip through luxury without being noticed. Across the room, the sharp voice of Chelsea's sister sliced through the ambient chatter. "Is that suede in this weather?" Her finger pointed toward Claire's shoes, worn but clean. The laughter followed fast, high-pitched and eager, bouncing from one bridesmaid to the next like a game of catch. Claire didn't flinch. She didn't turn. She adjusted the edge of the tray and walked away without changing her expression. The comment didn't sting. Comments like that were just noise, predictable and shallow. From the bar, Ethan watched the moment play out. He wasn't a regular at these kinds of events, but he had a way of noticing things others didn't. He saw Claire's posture stiffen just for a second before she disappeared behind a pillar with her tray. He opened his mouth slightly, then thought better of it and took a sip of his drink instead. In the prep tent behind the estate, Claire grabbed a towel and dried her hands. One of the ice chests had leaked again, soaking the boxes underneath. She bent down to shift a crate of bottled water and wiped her arm across her forehead. The night air inside the tent was cooler than the ballroom, quieter too. From her backpack, tucked under a folding table, she pulled out a small velvet pouch. Her eyes scanned the space once, no one else around. She unfastened the drawstring slightly and peeked inside, then quickly closed it again. With steady hands, she wrapped it in a cloth napkin and slipped it back into her bag. It wasn't time yet. Back inside, the music shifted to a slow instrumental. Claire walked past the gift table, nodding politely at the older gentleman, adjusting the seating chart. She was stopped by the catering lead, who handed her a new tray and gestured toward the dance floor. Claire took it and moved on, careful, not to draw attention. As she reached the dance area, she noticed Ethan again. He was standing next to the groom, who was too busy laughing at a story to pay much attention. Ethan's eyes flicked toward Claire briefly, and this time he gave a small nod. She returned it with the barest of smiles before focusing on offering the small bites to nearby guests. The groom's laughter carried louder than necessary. You ever meet someone and just know their background noise, like nothing they do could ever matter? He glanced sideways at Claire, not even trying to whisper. Ethan frowned. "Maybe don't talk like that during your own wedding weekend." Claire heard it, but again said nothing. She collected her tray and returned to the kitchen area without a word. Later in the night, the server from earlier passed by her in the tent again. "You okay?" Claire nodded. "Some people are just loud. Doesn't mean they're important." She sat down on an overturned crate and reached into her backpack. Her fingers brushed against the velvet again, just for a second, grounding her. Her phone buzzed with a new message, a reminder from the antique dealer. They'll be looking for the crown piece by Monday. Museum wants confirmation it's authentic. She didn't reply. Outside, fairy lights blinked above the stone patio where the late-night coffee cart was now set up. Claire stepped out, breathing in the cooler air. One of the bridesmaids walked past her, phone in hand, mid-selfie. God, this wedding is like a Vogue spread. Even the servers are aesthetic, she said to the screen, before vanishing inside. Claire let out a small breath, more amused than angry. She walked toward the edge of the garden, where the hedges gave a view of the lake. It was quiet there, the sounds of the celebration muffled by distance. She reached into her coat pocket this time and pulled out a simple hair clip, pinning back a loose strand that had fallen over her eyes. She wasn't dressed for the occasion, not by their standards, but she didn't care, not hiding this time. Ethan's voice came from behind her, not aggressive, just curious. She turned slowly. Didn't know I was supposed to be. He stepped beside her. You don't talk much. I talk when I have something to say. He nodded, then looked at the water. You work these events often? Enough to know who to avoid and when to walk away. There was a pause. Ethan glanced down at the bag slung over her shoulder. What's in the pouch? Claire didn't react right away. Something that doesn't belong to them. He smiled a little. Sounds like a story. It is, she said simply, but not the kind that starts with champagne and fake tears. From the patio, laughter erupted again. Chelsea was giving a speech now, her voice theatrical, her arms waving. Claire and Ethan turned to look, but Claire's gaze didn't stay long. She always like that? Claire asked. Ethan shrugged. She was better when we were 12. Claire gave a small laugh, the first real one of the evening. Aren't we all? They stood in silence for a moment, the music and voices behind them softening into background noise. Claire looked at her watch. I should grab that ice before they send someone else. She started walking back toward the tent, but Ethan called after her. Hey, I meant what I said. You handled all that earlier, better than most would. Claire paused, her back still turned. Handling things is easy when you don't expect anyone to be kind. She disappeared into the dark. Inside the tent, she reached for the ice bags again. Her fingers brushed the pouch once more, just for reassurance. It was still there, safe, untouched. Tomorrow was another day, and she wouldn't be invisible much longer. Claire stepped through the side door of the ballroom, balancing a tray of fresh drinks. The room had shifted into its evening glow. Candlelight now flickered along every surface, while servers moved in synchronized loops to keep the glasses full. Claire moved toward the head table, scanning for empty flutes. A flash of movement near the flower arch caught her eye just a second too late. She turned and bumped directly into a decorator adjusting a hanging garland. The tray jolted in her hands. A glass teetered, toppled, and the elbow of the decorator hit a fragile centerpiece. The cascading effect was instant. Glass cracked, water spilled, and a mess of peonies and eucalyptus leaves scattered across. The polished marble floor. Gasps echoed from the guests nearby. Claire dropped to her knees immediately, setting the tray down and reaching for napkins. The decorator, wide-eyed but silent, backed away quickly. As Claire gathered the fallen arrangement, she felt eyes on her. And then, the sound of stilettos clicking toward her. What is going on? Chelsea's voice sliced through the air like the stem of a broken rose. Claire looked up. Her hands were wet from the spilled water, the flowers crumpled between her fingers. She didn't speak. She knew better. Chelsea's tone tightened. Were you going through the table setup? What were you even doing near this section? I bumped into the florist. I'm cleaning it up, Claire replied, soft but steady. I saw you kneeling down with flowers in your hands. Do you think we're stupid? Guests were looking now. Claire remained on the floor, carefully reassembling the centerpiece. Her face gave nothing away. I don't care where you're from, Chelsea continued, but in my wedding, you don't wander into parts of the room you don't belong in. Across the room, Ethan pushed away from the bar, stepping forward before the silence stretched too long. She's just doing her job, he said calmly, loud enough to cut through Chelsea's judgment. Chelsea turned her head sharply. Ethan, this isn't your concern. You made it everyone's concern the moment you raised your voice. Claire looked down and kept placing the petals gently back into their place, unmoved by the sudden audience. A woman from the planning team arrived with a towel and helped Claire with the cleanup. Chelsea scoffed and walked away, her heels echoing behind her like a verdict. By the time Claire stood, Ethan was gone too. But the weight of that brief moment stuck to her like the scent of wine that had spilled during the chaos, subtle but persistent. The evening wore on, and Claire returned to her quiet rhythm. She helped clear plates, nodded politely at guests who never quite looked her in the eye, and folded linens with mechanical grace. At some point, the ballroom transitioned from dinner to dancing, and the nightlights outside the venue flickered on. Claire stepped outside toward the catering van parked near the kitchen exit, pulling her jacket tight as the temperature dropped. The scent of freshly brewed coffee from the side cart drifted on the breeze. She heard footsteps crunch on the gravel behind her. "Hey!" Ethan's voice was softer now, less polished. She didn't turn around right away, just adjusted her collar. "I'm off the clock, I figured," he said, moving to stand beside her. They stared out at the dark hedges that lined the driveway. A gentle hum of conversation leaked from inside the venue, but out here it felt quieter. "I shouldn't have let that go on," Ethan said, kicking a small pebble with his shoe. Claire shrugged. "You didn't start it." "But I waited too long to end it." She glanced at him briefly. "You said something, that's more than most." A pause passed between them. Ethan watched her hands steady and slow as she wrapped her scarf tighter. "You do this full-time?" he asked. She raised an eyebrow. "Get humiliated by rich brides?" He chuckled. "I meant catering." Claire hesitated. "This pays my rent. And the other thing?" he asked, folding his arms. She tilted her head, considering. "That pays in curiosity." He looked amused. "That's a strange currency." "It grows interest," she replied dryly. He leaned against the side of the van, his curiosity sharpening. "So what's the other thing?" She sighed, not ready but not avoiding either. "I collect rare things, stuff people toss out, not realizing what it's worth." "Antiques?" he asked. Claire nodded once. "Or heirlooms, pieces with forgotten stories. I find them, fix them, give them purpose again." There was something about the way she said it. No pitch, no pride, just quiet certainty. "Sounds like a hobby with serious patience," Ethan said. Claire gave a half-smile. "People don't usually notice patience until it's standing in the middle of their ballroom." He laughed again, this time more genuinely. "You talk like you're carrying secrets." "Maybe I am," she said without looking at him. She reached into her bag to pull out her phone, checking the time. As she did, the velvet pouch slipped from the open flap and landed softly on the ground. Ethan bent down quickly and picked it up, his hand brushing against hers as he handed it back. The fabric was thick and well-worn, the kind used to store something delicate, something important. Claire didn't thank him. She just slipped it back into her bag with smooth precision and zipped it shut. "You don't want to tell me what's in it, do you?" he asked. "No," she replied simply, "but you brought it here. I bring it everywhere." Ethan stared at her a moment longer, reading between the lines. She didn't fidget. She didn't explain. And he didn't press. "Well, maybe one day," he said. Claire turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Maybe," she echoed. Another pause passed, this one more comfortable. "Well," he said again, "I should probably get back in there before someone accuses me of stealing centerpieces." Claire smirked. "Try not to get caught holding any flowers." He gave her a small two-fingered salute and walked back toward the lights. Claire watched him go, her hand resting lightly on the pouch through the fabric of her bag. She didn't move for a while. The stars were out now, and whatever was coming next, she knew it was getting close. The sun had barely cleared the treetops when Claire finished wiping down the last row of chairs on the back lawn. Morning dew clung to the fabric, leaving dark patches that would dry under the rising heat. Her shift had technically ended an hour ago, but she'd stayed behind to help Margot, one of the older coordinators, who walked with a limp and never asked for help, but always looked like she needed it. Claire moved quietly, folding linens and boxing up candle holders, letting the rhythm of cleanup settle her. The estate was still sleepy. A few vendors buzzed around the entrance, some carrying flowers, others wheeling in silver trays covered in foil. Inside the main house, muffled voices drifted out through open windows. Claire crouched behind the tall hydrangeas that bordered the garden path, arranging place cards into neat bundles, when a familiar voice floated down from the veranda above. "I'm just saying," Chelsea's voice rang out. "Keep an eye on the girl with the dark bun. She was too close to the display table yesterday. Probably pocketed something small. You saw her shoes." Claire didn't move. She stayed crouched behind the hedge, hands paused mid-swipe. Another voice joined in, older, colder. "I hope you're wrong, darling. This isn't the place for drama." Chelsea laughed lightly. "Please, Mom. We're surrounded by antiques and strangers. Something's going to go missing." Claire stood slowly, brushed her hands on her apron and walked away. No reaction, no flinch. But her eyes were sharper now, and the familiar ache pressed against her chest. She wasn't surprised, but that didn't make it lighter. Out near the back driveway, Ethan leaned against a white delivery truck, a half-empty coffee cup in one hand. He spotted Claire coming down the gravel path and gave her a small nod. "Hey, you're early. Or late." "Finished, just helping Margot clean up," she said. Ethan took a sip, watching her. "You're not like the others they hired. Most temps vanish the second their shift ends." Claire gave a dry smile. "I don't vanish. I fade." He laughed softly. "You act like this is your first wedding, but you're not even watching." She looked at him, head tilted slightly. "I've already seen what happens when people pretend love is a prize." That quieted him. He didn't know how to follow it, so he nodded instead. A small breeze ruffled the edges of Claire's apron. She didn't say more, and Ethan didn't push. A young planner called Ethan from the steps, waving a clipboard. He waved back. As he turned to go, he hesitated. "You're still carrying that pouch?" he asked. Claire tapped the side of her bag gently. "Always." Back inside the main house, guests began to trickle in. Claire re-entered through the service hallway, pausing only to check her appearance in a small mirror near the coat rack. She'd swapped her work apron for a clean blouse. Nothing too noticeable, just enough to not look like staff. Margot met her near the bar. "You didn't have to stay, honey." Claire shrugged. "I know, but I wanted to." The older woman patted her arm. "Well, I'm grateful. People like you keep things from falling apart." Claire moved through the space with practiced ease. The atmosphere had shifted. Final arrangements, last touches, small whispers of tension. Everyone smiled more forcefully. Claire drifted past the ballroom door just in time to hear Ethan laughing with a groomsman. "She's marrying the idea, not the man," Ethan said. Claire paused. The groomsman chuckled. "Don't say that too loud. Chelsea still thinks she's marrying royalty." Ethan's voice lowered. "She's marrying his father's trust fund, and I'm the only one who'll say it out loud." Claire stepped away before they noticed her. The truth in Ethan's voice had no bitterness, just fatigue. Later in the afternoon, she was seated on a bench near the rose garden, sipping water, when Ethan found her again. His tie was loose around his neck, jacket folded over his arm. "You disappeared again." "I was never really here," she replied. He dropped beside her. "All right. Tell me what's in the pouch." Claire raised her brows. "You're direct." "I've been called worse." She held his gaze for a moment, then looked away. "You'll see it when they're ready." "They?" Claire didn't answer. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on knees. "You really enjoy making people curious, don't you?" She smiled without showing teeth. "No. I enjoy watching people underestimate what doesn't shine." He looked at her more closely now, as if trying to solve a riddle he didn't know the rules to. Before he could say more, Chelsea's sharp voice cut across the courtyard. "Ethan! There you are. We need you for family photos. And maybe stay clear of the help today." Claire didn't flinch, but Ethan looked annoyed. "I'll be right there," he called back, not moving. Chelsea's eyes flicked to Claire, then back to Ethan. Her smile thinned, but she turned and walked away. Ethan stood slowly. "She's worried you'll steal the spotlight." Claire raised her brow. "I'm not dressed for it." He looked at her for a moment. "Doesn't matter. Some people carry it whether they want to or not." He started to walk off, then turned back. "Don't let her drag you into her circus." Claire nodded once. "I don't attend performances I didn't audition for." Ethan laughed as he walked away, shaking his head. Claire leaned back on the bench, her hand resting casually on the pouch inside her bag. The weight of it grounded her, as it always did. She wasn't there to shine, she was there to finish something, and no amount of glitter or gossip would change that. Claire sat quietly on a stone bench tucked beneath a tree near the entrance to the estate. The late afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, casting soft patterns on the walkway. She was no longer in uniform. The apron was gone, replaced by a modest navy dress and a dark overcoat, simple and clean. She wore no jewelry, no makeup, no hint of the staff badge she'd clipped to her belt all weekend. Guests passed by her, none recognizing her as the woman who had served wine just the night before. She liked it that way. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen. A call from Miss Evelyn. She answered immediately, her tone softening. "Hey!" The voice on the other end crackled with age and warmth. "I saw the pictures online. They're setting up that ridiculous cake with gold trim, just like the brochure. You still hiding behind silver trays?" Claire smiled faintly. "Not anymore." "You get my message?" "I did," Claire said. "The curator wants confirmation before they write the article." "You gonna tell them the truth?" "I haven't decided." Evelyn paused. "You could have come as yourself, you know." "You have. More claim to that venue than half the people there." Claire let the silence hang for a second before answering. "I didn't want to walk in and make it about me. It was never about you, but you keep showing up for it anyway." Claire's fingers toyed with the edge of her coat. "I didn't think they'd notice me if I just worked the floor." "Sweetheart," Evelyn said, "you carry a piece of history in your bag. No matter where you stand, someone's going to notice." Claire didn't respond. The call ended gently and she tucked the phone away. Her eyes wandered toward the main building. Cars were arriving faster now. Guests in suits and gowns poured out in waves. Every few minutes another luxury sedan pulled up, unloading more people dressed to impress each other. Footsteps approached again, slower this time. Claire didn't look until Ethan's voice broke through the murmur of heels on gravel. "You changed," he said. She looked up. "Not really." Ethan sat beside her without asking. "You blend in better now." "That's the idea." He studied her face. "You're calm. Most people would be nervous." Claire tilted her head. "I've been through worse than pretty people in judgmental clothes." Ethan smiled faintly, then nodded at her bag. "Still carrying that thing?" "Always," she said. He hesitated, then leaned forward. "You don't have to tell me, but I'm going to ask one more time. What's in it?" Claire looked at him, the guardedness softening just slightly. "My mother left me a crown." He didn't blink. "Like a metaphor." She shook her head. "Not a metaphor, a real crown. Filigree gold, gemstones missing, glass cracked. I found it wrapped in an old apron with her initials sewn into the hem." Ethan sat back, blinking. Slowly. "That's not what I expected." "I restored it," she said quietly. "Took me 3 years. Every gem replaced, every dent smoothed by hand." "You ever wear it?" he asked, his tone sincere. Claire's lips curved, almost reluctant. "I might today." Ethan exhaled, absorbing the words. "If you walk in there with it, Chelsea's going to have a meltdown, publicly. She'll find a way to humiliate you." Claire stood, brushing a leaf from her coat. "Good," he looked up at her. "Good?" She nodded. "Let her look right at me when she does. I'm not hiding anymore." "Claire," he started, but she cut him off. "I'm not going in to cause a scene. I'm going in because I belong in that room as much as any of them. I've paid in silence long enough." Ethan stood too, watching her. "You don't owe them anything." "I know," she said, her tone calm. "But sometimes it's not about what I owe. Sometimes it's about what I refuse to carry anymore." They walked side by side along the edge of the garden. The path split at the grand staircase, guests going up in one direction, servers entering from another. Claire turned toward the guest entry. Ethan didn't stop her this time. At the base of the stairs, she paused. Her hand dipped into the bag, brushing the velvet pouch. Ethan glanced at her. "You sure?" Claire nodded slowly. "I was never unsure. I was just waiting for the right moment." She didn't look back as she climbed the stairs, her steps steady and unhurried. The back entrance of the ballroom came into view, the doors just slightly ajar. Inside, chandeliers flickered, music floated beneath the buzz of conversation, and somewhere in the center of it all stood the woman who had tried so hard to make Claire feel small. Claire adjusted the strap of her bag, pulled her coat closed, and stepped into the building, not as staff, not as decoration, but as something far more dangerous to people like Chelsea, someone who didn't flinch anymore. The music had already begun inside when Claire stepped through the side door of the ballroom. She didn't walk with urgency or ceremony. Her posture was quiet, composed, her bag pressed gently against her side as she moved past rows of gold-backed chairs and white petals scattered along the aisle. She wasn't here to interrupt. She was here to return something. The keys she'd borrowed from the venue manager during cleanup that morning. That was it. She spotted him near the reception table at the far end of the room, adjusting a floral arrangement. She stepped around a server with a tray of champagne flutes, but as she neared, her bag brushed against the edge of a nearby chair. The zipper tugged. The velvet pouch slipped loose. It landed on the floor with a dull thud. A staff member standing nearby bent instinctively to pick it up, then froze. She blinked, mouth parting slightly. "Is that—" Claire reached for the pouch, but the woman stepped back. The fabric had shifted just enough to reveal part of the gold beneath. Not polished costume metal, not novelty. Real gold, old, embossed with a subtle royal crest and framed by deep violet stones. Another voice spoke, this time louder, from across the room. "Wait a minute. Is that—" Heads began to turn. The ballroom hushed not from silence, but from a collective intake of breath. Whispers moved quickly, faster than footsteps. Chelsea's mother, wearing a fitted emerald gown and holding a flute of rosé, turned sharply toward the commotion. Her eyes locked on the pouch in Claire's hands. She stepped closer, heels clicking with precision. "That crown," she said. "Where did you get that?" Claire's voice was steady. "It didn't burn." The woman blinked. "Excuse me? You thought it was destroyed?" "In the fire." "But it wasn't. It was pawned," Claire said. "I found it 6 years ago in a lockbox from an estate sale in Vermont. The box was marked damaged heirlooms. The crown was underneath old linens. I restored it myself." A stunned silence rippled out. Chelsea's mother stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "That piece belonged to my grandmother. She wore it at her engagement dinner in 1926. It was passed down to my mother, until we lost it." Claire didn't move. It was never lost. It was discarded. A few feet away, Ethan had entered unnoticed. He stood quietly now, watching, saying nothing. One of the photographers, sensing drama, turned his lens toward the scene. The sound of the shutter broke the pause. Then another camera clicked, and another. The crown was no longer hidden. Claire pulled it fully from the pouch and held it in both hands, not to flaunt, but to show. The gold caught the chandelier light. and refracted it into soft, warm tones that danced on the floor. Guests who had been drifting toward the ceremony began edging closer to the back. Phones came out. Whispered questions floated up like steam. Chelsea appeared next, pushing her way through the forming crowd. Her hair was already styled for the aisle, a veil pinned loosely into soft waves. She stopped short when she saw Claire. "What are you doing here?" she snapped. "You're not supposed to be in this room." Claire looked her in the eye. "I have permission to be here." "From who?" Chelsea barked. The venue manager stepped forward, slightly out of breath. "From me." Chelsea turned to him. Why would she have permission? He hesitated for a second too long. Claire didn't wait for him. "I'm not just a guest," she said. "I'm an investor. I purchased a stake in this property 3 years ago. Anonymously through a broker." Murmurs. Someone gasped. A champagne flute was set down hastily. Chelsea looked between them. "That's not possible," Claire shrugged gently. "Check the records. I own 10%. The venue manager gave a slow nod. "It's true, we never knew who the silent partner was until recently, but it's her." Chelsea's mouth opened, then closed. She took a half step back. Ethan moved beside Claire now, his voice low and sure. "Looks like the crown found its way home." Claire handed the piece back to the venue manager, who stood holding it like a sacred object. All around them, the buzz of speculation grew louder. Guests who hadn't even known Claire existed just hours ago were now leaning in, peering, whispering. The woman they'd dismissed as a server was now the center of the most talked-about moment of the day. Chelsea's face burned. "You've been planning this." Claire's expression stayed neutral. "No, I just stopped hiding." "I want her out of here," Chelsea snapped to the manager. "I'm afraid I can't do that," he said firmly. "Then I'm leaving," Chelsea announced, turning on her heel. Claire didn't stop her. She simply adjusted the sleeve of her coat, standing still as Chelsea stormed past her, pushing through a sea of confused faces toward the hallway. The ceremony music faded out. The officiant looked around uncertainly. Guests no longer faced the altar. They faced Claire. Someone took another picture, and somewhere near the center of the room, a guest whispered, "She was just the server yesterday." Another replied, "She's the story today." Claire said nothing more. She didn't need to. The crown wasn't on her head, but in that moment no one could deny who wore the weight of legacy. Claire stood quietly near the rear alcove of the ballroom, the crown now resting in the gloved hands of the venue coordinator. The room still, buzzed from the recent discovery, but Claire remained grounded, her expression unchanged. She hadn't raised her voice once, hadn't smiled with satisfaction, hadn't made a scene. The crown had been shown, the truth spoken, and that was enough. "I think it should go in the display room," Claire said softly. "Where it belongs." The coordinator, an older woman with a thoughtful gaze and a clipboard still tucked under her arm, looked at her with something close to reverence. "Before we do that, would you mind wearing it just for a moment?" Claire hesitated. "That's not necessary." "It's not for you," the woman said gently. "It's for the story that will be told after today." Before Claire could decline again, a photographer stepped forward. "Just one photo. You don't have to pose, just stand." Claire glanced down at the crown. She reached for it slowly, then lifted it with both hands and placed it on her head. It fit with eerie precision, as if it had waited all this time for this exact moment. The room didn't applaud. There was no dramatic soundtrack, no spotlight, just a single click of a camera. She stood tall, eyes forward, arms at her sides, not a queen, not a guest, just a woman who had stopped hiding. When she removed it, the coordinator took it gently and placed it into a velvet-lined box. The lid was closed. The box was carried out toward the hallway leading to the antique display wing. Claire didn't follow. Her part with the crown was finished. Ethan approached quietly from behind, stepping into her peripheral vision as if he knew better than to come head-on. "Why did you come back?" he asked, no preamble. Claire didn't look at him right away. She stared toward the altar where guests had finally begun to retake their seats, though the ceremony itself seemed irreparably delayed. I wanted to see, she said, if I could walk into that room and not feel like I was nothing. Ethan studied her face, and she turned to him now, a quiet calmness softening her eyes. I didn't feel anything. That's how I knew I was finally done. Ethan gave a short exhale of something between a laugh and a sigh. That's a hell of a reason to come to a wedding. Claire shrugged slightly. Everyone's here to feel something. I just wanted to stop feeling less. The hum of resumed conversation buzzed around them. A few heads still turned to stare, but most of the attention had moved on. Claire didn't mind. Chelsea stormed back into the room, lips tight, her veil slightly askew. Her eyes found Claire immediately. "She's still here?" she snapped at the venue manager. "She hasn't broken any rules," he replied coolly. "She's a verified stakeholder. She can stay as long as she wants." Chelsea's nostrils flared. "This is a wedding, my wedding." "And she hasn't interfered with that either," he replied. "If you're ready to resume, the officiant is waiting." Chelsea glanced at Claire with fury, sharpened by powerlessness, then turned without another word and marched toward the front of the aisle. Claire's gaze followed her briefly, then returned to Ethan, who hadn't moved. "You handled that well," he said. "I wasn't here to win," Claire replied. "I was here to remember." A middle-aged woman in a sleek burgundy dress stepped forward, pausing beside Claire. She wore minimal jewelry, except for a lanyard with an embossed museum tag tucked just below her blazer lapel. "I hope I'm not interrupting," the woman said politely. Claire turned. "Not at all. I'm with the Historical Design Museum in D.C., the woman said. I couldn't help but notice the crown and the story that came with it." Claire offered a soft smile. "It's a long one." "Most good pieces are," the curator replied. "Would you be open to exhibiting it with your restoration notes? It's rare we get an item with such a personal provenance." Claire's brow lifted slightly. "You're serious?" The woman nodded. "Quite. I think it deserves to be seen, not just as an heirloom, but as a piece of history that was almost forgotten." Claire didn't answer right away. She glanced at Ethan, then back at the curator. "I'll consider it, but only if the story is told honestly." The woman nodded. "Of course." A card was exchanged. The curator drifted away, already speaking into her phone. Ethan folded his arms, shaking his head slightly. "You do realize you've become the story of this wedding, right?" Claire looked back toward the guests, now reassembling like nothing had happened. Her gaze landed briefly on Chelsea, stiff-backed and stiff-faced, standing near her groom like someone guarding. "A vault. I didn't want to be," Claire said. Ethan chuckled. "Doesn't matter. You are." Claire turned to him, her voice even. "Then I hope it's a good one." The corners of her mouth lifted, not smug, not triumphant, just sure. They stood there a moment longer, watching as the music began again, softer this time, like the event itself had lowered its voice in the presence of something more real. And Claire, without a trace of drama or demand, became part of the landscape once more. Not hidden, not dismissed, not forgotten, just fully present, crowned by nothing but her own peace. Claire moved slowly through the wide, bright hallway of the museum, her steps light against the polished marble floor. The exhibit was nestled on the second floor, tucked between wings that usually displayed ancient jewelry and textiles. Today, the walls bore a new sign: modern royalty, crowns beyond bloodlines. Beneath it, portraits hung of women from vastly different lives, each with a crown in some form: iron, glass, ceramic, crystal, each carrying a history that wasn't inherited by birthright, but earned through resilience, craft, and reclamation. Claire paused in front of the central glass case. Inside it sat the crown she had carried for years, in a velvet pouch. the same one she had restored in quiet evenings at her apartment, the same one that had once sat in a forgotten estate box. It now rested on a velvet pedestal, gleaming under soft lights. The gold shimmered with subtle warmth, each gemstone set back into its original groove, the cracks no longer visible. A small plaque beneath it read, "Found, restored, worn." Visitors circled slowly around the display, snapping photos, whispering to each other. A docent stood nearby, answering questions about the origin. Claire didn't step forward. She simply watched. For the first time, she didn't feel the need to explain herself or defend the crown's presence. Ethan arrived a few minutes later, hands in his coat pockets. No tie, no jacket, just a plain navy sweater and sneakers. He came up beside her like it was the most natural thing in the world. He nodded toward the case. "There she is," Claire smiled. "Still standing." He tilted his head. "So, still collecting lost things?" Claire's eyes stayed on the crown. "Only the ones people laugh at," he grinned. "So, everything valuable." She turned to look at him. "Exactly." They drifted down the row of displays, passing photos of women who had built crowns out of scrap metal, grandmothers who'd turned refugee artifacts into heirlooms, artists who melted down wedding rings to forge something new. It wasn't about royalty. It was about worth. Worth claimed instead of assigned. A little girl, no more than 7 or 8, walked up beside the glass case, her face pressed gently against the edge, leaving a smudge. Her fingers gripped the barrier as she stared at Claire's crown with wide eyes. She whispered, almost too softly to hear, "I want one." Claire knelt beside her, lowering herself to the girl's height. She didn't touch her. She didn't smile like adults often did to children they didn't know. She just looked at the crown with her. "Then start looking," she said. The girl blinked. "Where?" Claire replied softly, "Anywhere people stop paying attention." The girl's mother called her back, and she ran off, but not without. Glancing back one more time at the crown, Claire stood up slowly. Ethan watched her. "You've changed." "I've stopped shrinking," she said. The two of them walked past the last case, where a video looped a short documentary, silent footage from the day of Chelsea's wedding. No names, no drama, just a moment. Claire standing with the crown in her hands, calm in a sea of chaos. They exited into the courtyard as the air cooled. The museum's garden wrapped gently around a set of paths leading to a chapel across the green. There, a small wedding was taking place. Claire paused. Through the open doors she could see the bride, young, glowing, laughing mid-step with her groom. No orchestra, no lavish floral arches, just family, and sunlight pouring through the stained glass. Claire watched them for a moment. Still. No jealousy, no bitterness, just stillness. Ethan glanced at her. "You want to stay and watch?" She shook her head. "No." They turned away together, walking across the stone path toward the street. Claire adjusted the strap of her bag across her shoulder and took one last glance back at the chapel. A voice, quiet and firm, carried through as she walked. They mocked a woman for not belonging. She answered with a crown that told them she never needed to. The city noise returned, but softer now, like the world had given her a little more room to breathe. If this story moved you, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe. More true human stories are on the way.